Welcome to Jane Austen's woods, the woods she would have walked as a girl. Every year Steventon has a Bluebell Day to raise money for St Michael's Hospice. This year it was to have been on the 2nd of May. But sadly we've had to cancel due to the coronavirus. St Michael's is a wonderful charity providing care in North Hampshire to people whose lives are limited by illness. It's had to shut down money-raising enterprises like its shops. Yet with the virus, it needs the money more than ever. So we at Steventon have decided to take a virtual walk through the beautiful woods where Jane Austen herself would have walked many years ago and admired the bluebells. She was, of course, born here in Steventon when her father, the Reverend George Austen, was the rector, and she lived here for 27 of the 41 years of her life. So let's start at the southern gateway into the woods, from what was once the walled kitchen garden of Steventon Manor. Guarding this gateway are two bears, shaped by box plants growing in wire frames, which were found sticking out of some old evergreen yew trees nearer to the manor. First, we must ask permission from the two bears and see if they allow us to go into the wood, and then we will open the gate and we will see in front of us a beautiful bluebell wood. Now this wood is not just a bluebell wood, it's semi-natural ancient woodland, oak and hazel. It dates back for hundreds of years, certainly to Saxon times, and this is shown by the stone cross, which is now in a 12th century church. So as we walk south along the path through the wood, we can see the bluebells on either side and the oak and hazel, and reflect on all those other people who may have passed through here in earlier times. Back in ancient times, oak and hazel woods were grown as a crop. They were much more valuable than arable. The oak was used for beams, rafters, purlins, etc., and the hazel for lath and plaster ceilings and walls, hurdles and fences. Much better to plant these than to put your money in the bank. Instead of earning interest, the trees grow a little bigger every year. The monks of Waltham Abbey knew this when they planted their spare money and used the trees to rebuild the 11th century abbey when it burnt down many years later. King Harold was supposed to be buried at Waltham Abbey, but I always wonder if he really was killed at Hastings, or did he get rescued by the lovely Swan Neck, and was his body substituted as the Saxon history relates? History gets written by the winner, the Normans, his story. At the end of this path we get to Copper Beech, where we turn to the right, and beyond this beach, in the field, in the south, was once a Roman villa. Here we walk along another path, through more woods and bluebells, until we come to a small glade where grows the ent, an ancient oak with a bench around it. Look up into the tree and you'll see a rose growing up it to its very top. It's called a Paul's Himalayan musk, planted by Sally, my wife, about 25 years ago. Its proliferous, small, pink-scented flowers blossom for about 2 weeks in mid-June, making the tree look like an enormous fruit tree in blossom. Sit on the bench and you might see a purple emperor butterfly, although they usually come in July, around Sally's birthday. They like hazel and oak. Take the path out to the southwest. Look to your right. In the wood there, fairies have been seen, twice. Some little girls saw them and tiptoed after them, but they, that's the fairies, that is, disappeared down a rabbit hole. Turn right, west, and a little further on, beside an old chalk pit, you will see that it has a shallow entrance, where the horse and cart went in to take out the chalk. I'm not sure what the chalk was used for. It may have been lining the fields, but I wonder, since we're on chalk downs anyway. Perhaps it was to make lime mortar when the building of the various manors needed the lime mortar. Walk down the path to the west, just inside the woods, and with the field on your left. You're still in ancient semi-natural woodland on the right, and a plethora of wild flowers, as well as the bluebells, primroses, wood anemones, celandine, wild violets, archangels, and blue-ground ivy. As we walked down this path, I remember once my dog came racing towards me, tail down, terrified. He was being chased by a barking roe deer, trying to kick him. That was odd, because the roe deer are usually very timid. And then the penny dropped with me. It's April. The deer are pregnant. It is about now that they give birth. Although the one unique thing about the roe deer is that they're able to delay their birth by a fortnight or so, depending on the weather. I've often noticed that a pregnant roe deer is closely followed by another deer who acts as a nanny. And sure enough, this was a nanny deer protecting the mother deer who had just given birth. And there was the tiny baby lying in the bluebells, still not able to walk. It's usually only an hour or so before they get up, but they're still very vulnerable, of course. Walk on, and we will come to the end of this wood, marked by a very low ridge, made of Norman dressed stone, and this once marked the parish boundary. Stand on the edge of the ridge and reflect. To the east was the wild wood, where the wild women of Waltham had their wicked way with the shy swains of Steventon. Move west over the old boundary and everything changes. The bluebells have gone, and there's a grass clearing where the ancient maps show it as yard. Presumably the yard of the old Norman Manor, which once stood in the next, quite big clearing to the west. The plan of this Norman Manor is still held in the parish records, and is also very clearly described in Richard Tanner's excellent book, Steventon, Home of Jane Austen. Now we can either go into clearing and reflect on the site of the Norman Manor, and it's interesting that it was here the king's horses were held before crossing the Channel en route for the Battle of Crecy in 1346. Or we can turn right, north, down an avenue of small trees where there were once cottages and where to this day flowers grow where their gardens were. Hidden near here is King Arthur's sword Excalibur, not in the lake as his PR man Alistair Campbell put it about. However, at Steventon we are of course Excalibur's keepers, and we're sworn to secrecy as to where exactly it's hidden. Turn right, and on our left is the fernery, a fascinating folly built in the early 20th century of reconstituted stone, with fireplaces and windows cannibalised from the Saxon or Norman manor houses. At the end of the line of yew trees you will see a sunken grotto, which we found about 2 years ago. We know little about it. The water in it never dries up. On a warm summer's evening, when the moon is full, it is said that nymphs sit on the edge, with their fair hair down over their shoulders, and they dangle their feet in the water. But they're very shy, and sadly I've never been able to photograph them. Walk back to the path, and we pass a giraffe called Chelsea. Reputedly, she got lost when she was following Hannibal's elephants. She was lagging a bit behind and went straight on when they turned right to go to Italy. You can still see the crocodile trying to get her, but do be careful that it doesn't bite you. Well, we're nearly home. The daffodil orchard amongst the fruit trees is on your left. Under the arch of the laurels and back into the walled garden through the gates. I hope you enjoyed this virtual Bluebell walk in aid of St Michael's Hospice, and perhaps you'll come again to the real thing next year. Please give generously to St Michael's Hospice